In dollar, the price has not changed. In Lviv, we see a similar picture. The price also almost has not changed over the last year in dollar. Let's now look at the mean average of the salary which people would spend on rental for one-room apartment. So in Kyiv, a year ago, 60% of the salary a person would have to spend to rent a one-room apartment. Now it's this indicator is 51%. So this indicator improved by 14.5%. In Lviv, from the indicator grew also improved by 14%. That's all from me. I tried to be brief, going through the first-hand market, through the secondary market. We have a lot of data at our loan statistics. We update them every day. I have several questions. Let's get back to Odessa. There is very interesting factor of Odessa, because we saw actually on many charts that front adjacent territories, the prices are not high. But Odessa, which we also call the frontline region, which is constantly, daily under shelling, the prices are not just staying high. The prices are growing. The first-hand development market growth. So does it indicate about the optimism of Ukrainians? Or what reasons do you see? In June, we went to Odessa. We're on the Odessa Developers Forum, and we asked them, so how do you explain this growing demand? Some say because the price grew because the cost of construction grew. To be honest, to be fair, before full-scale invasion, Odessa held the second place after the capital, and Lviv was only on the third place. Now the situation changed, but I actually don't know the answer to this question, because the price actually changed sharply. And from the beginning of the year, it started to grow. In Odessa, so all Ukrainians, they dream about their own accommodation, even in war, even being in the war situation. If in Europe it's okay to rent apartment for entire life, in Ukraine people are trying to save and buy their own apartment. So I accounted to the mentality of Ukrainians, to some traditions, customs of Ukrainians. In Odessa, even property for profit is being built in Odessa. What apartments are most popular in Ukraine? The first-hand market, the secondary market, and what's the number of square meters? I don't have now these statistics. Speaking about the most demand, probably what I would have to look, for me to answer this question, I would have to look at the numbers, but I don't have these figures. Usually, traditionally, the number of the first-hand constructions are traditionally being sold less than secondary market. Speaking of the demand a bit changed. While in before, 25th floor was very popular. Now this higher floors are less popular. People are also more inclined to buy ready apartments with repair, and so that's why people looking for the secondary market objects, because this provides them ready accommodation which they can just buy and move into it. So I would say it's difficult to say what is more popular, but that's definitely that the apartments with repairs have more popularity, and developers also offer such options, including white box. Also, there were thoughts or trends that people are more interested in the apartments in the smaller apartments, not in the multiple-story apartments, but with lower floors, with apartments with smaller number of floors. So how do you plan, what perspective do you see for the period after the war? I think it's not quite appropriate, and we're very ecology-oriented business, so I wouldn't give you any forecast because the situation really depends. The forecast really depends on the situation, and it's very difficult to forecast something for the real estate market. Speaking about the scenarios, when we spoke with developers, they told us, let's imagine the apartments were being even sold in March of 2022. Who would think in the March selling or buying the apartments, but they were still selling and buying. So what these signals say to us? Just because Ukrainians still continue buying and selling the apartments, the accommodation, whether the Ukrainians are ready to buy apartments. Of course, it's always valuable purchase, and there is a quite serious emotional component. So depending on our state, on our mental state, depends the real estate market. But Ukrainians are very adaptive. Ukrainians adapted to these circumstances, and they adapted not just survive, but also to develop. Ukrainians launching new businesses. So in general, Ukrainians adjusted to the situation and get back to the idea of purchasing accommodation. When all this ends, when we have victory, I have no doubt, but this is my subjective opinion, there is no doubt that the real estate will gain a new momentum after that, because since the beginning of the war and until 2024, 90 millions of square meters have been either ruined or seriously damaged. That almost 9% of the entire housing market in Ukraine. So definitely there will be demand for accommodation, and not to mention old accommodation fund, which requires repair and renovation. After the war, after the end of the war, whether the demand will grow, definitely it will grow, especially if we have state mortgage lending programs, which will allow to delay the complete payment. So the prices constantly grow, and I expect the prices to continue to grow even after the war. You mentioned mortgage lending. Let's talk about this, whether Ukrainians use mortgage lending, whether there is whether Oselia is popular among Ukrainians, and if you have any statistics on that. Of course, there is demand for Oselia, and recently our marketing team analyzed the demand for Oselia in Google, and constant growth is noted there. Remember when mortgage lending first launched in Ukraine, and of course people are interested in this process. In the beginning, They bit by bit improved the mortgage lending program, and as of today, from the Ukrfin accommodation, they increased budget, and over the last month, the mortgage are being issued to 1.5 billion per month. So the budget grew for the mortgage lending, and based on what banks say, but based on the information from the banks, greater number of loans are being issued, and of course. We all have acquaintances who either bought the apartment with year sale or used the mortgage lending. If everything is all right with your documents, you came prepared to the bank, and if all your documents are ready, you can receive loan in just a few days. Sometimes the issuing a loan is delayed because a person does not have all documents required for the loans. If a person has all the documents, then this person will much sooner receive the loan. There are very positive signals from ESL, and first of them is increase in financing. And the last question from me about reliability of developers, because there were slides when you indicated that almost half of the accommodation is being commissioned on time. Most of them are being delayed. So what about this situation now? Maybe Loon tracks the rating of developers, because this is also the factor for which Ukrainians choose secondary market, because many lost their money. We remember those stories. What is the situation now? The reliability of developer is always the question which interests all people, because when you have to choose apartment at the first-hand market, you have to choose developer, and you need to understand criteria. So the reliability is quite a subjective parameter. There is no such a criteria as a reliability. Maybe the state sometime will introduce such criteria, but currently no such criteria exists. It always is a set of certain parameters which could be factored in to assess the reliability of a certain developer. Speaking about our circumstances and the data that we have, so what influences the criteria, the reliability of the developer? First of all, the dynamics of the construction, whether developer builds or not, continues construction or not. And that's why in Loon, developer by developer, we have all the projects carried out by the developer. And we can estimate the dynamics of the construction as of each of the project as of today. By each of the projects as of today, there are our Loon photographers who photograph and monitor the construction of each project month by month basis. In order to assess the dynamics of the construction, that's the first dynamic of the construction. It's one of the first indicators which must be taken into account. Next comes, you need to look at how many projects the developer launched. So if the developer launched at the same time about 20 projects, that's probably too much, because you need to have some capacity to implement all the projects. So you also need to factor in additional indicators. You also need to factor in other indicators, but nobody can tell you which developer is the most reliable, because there are some developers who had a reputation of very reliable, which lost this reputation by now. So we don't take upon ourselves the responsibility of giving this rating of reliability, but we give people all the data, all the documents, permissions, so that a person can evaluate and make decision for themselves. The objective indicator is the apartments which are being commissioned. Thank you very much for your replies. I will remind you that we discuss the real estate market at Media Center of Ukraine continues its work at 1300. We will talk about changes in the armed forces of Ukraine, in particular new contracts in the army, going responsibility from TCK to SNAP and other topics.